Sandeep, I think most of us, means we as VCs keep getting accused that there's a herd mentality in us, right? As TCM said, the flavor of the month is hyper-local. So everyone, from grocers to aggregators of plumbers to electricians to drivers, everyone is getting funded. So do we really have that herd mentality, or how does it work? Is this for the benefit of the people who want to raise money here? In the sense, should they be in the business of looking what the next flavor would be for us, and then they start tinkering, according?
Yeah, it's a tough one, right? Because there's definitely there's a prevailing sense of FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. There's this overwhelming sense that encompassed India, and like we went out to raise our fund, like I said, in 2013, 12, 13, 14, that time frame. Until you hit 2014, India was pretty much a bad word, and then it suddenly became interesting. And then suddenly there was this deep sense of FOMO, and oh my God, how do I not get into this? How do I? So it's kind of hereditary to an extent, right? In terms of our lineage, in terms of that chain of promised returns. Everyone kind of wakes up at a point in time and says, yes, it's happening. And so suddenly, they arrive and the money arrives. And as the money arrives, you are in this loop of having to address back to everyone, why were you crazy enough to go and make that investment when the whole world was making this investment? And so I'd say, for the, like I said, the benefit of the people in the room, I think that it's hard to match your vision with necessarily the state of the market, but you can't be oblivious to it. And I think that it's really critical to find not the firm, but more importantly, the partner at the firm that understands your area and is willing to kind of get behind it. So if, for example, I am a die-hard music focused person and you're building a music business but the market is dead against it, you still might find traction with me. And not to say that I am, but I'm just saying in general, that might be the way you want to approach these things. So absolutely, I mean, the statement of, are we lemmings? Do we all kind of jump off the bridge at the same time? And all of that, to an extent, it's a function of how the market moves and how the opportunities seem to arrive. But there are enough counterintuitive situations that get done, and I think that there will be, they will take time to develop, and hopefully you have patient people like Nupur who will support you through those times and wait for the exits to eventually arrive and the scale to take place. And so, I think it's still possible. So, but that is the big hurdle in the room and the challenge, yeah.
Shrenik, I think most of the venture capital funds have raised money from foreign LPs or foreign institutions like IFC and others, right? And they do bring in a lot to the table in the sense their global experiences, right? What the trends are. Now, you being a totally domestic fund, so to say, right? But do you see that your approach is different from like Sandeep's or Rahul's or TCM's, or our approach in terms of what you would look for and what the other venture capital funds in India would look for, who have raised money overseas have, right?
I reckon there'll be some similarities and there'll be some differences. And I think the differences really are that we look for a different thematic approach. So we don't necessarily look for technological disruptions. We may look for baby products companies, which is a good brand, or we may look for just food companies, or just brand-centric ideas, because that comes from our LP. I think the other difference would be that because it's our own capital, we don't have a time horizon clock with us, which it's us. We don't have structural restrictions. We don't have size. I go down to a few crores. I go up to my largest investment is like 1,000 crores. So largest single investment is 1,000 crores. So I think some of that has its own implications. I think we don't invest outside India, so we have a very keen intensity on engaging with Indian themed ideas. We do have an office now in San Francisco. We just set it up last month. So we are looking at how disruptive ideas from the Valley can be brought here in partnership. I think I think Uber would be a very important um, point of evolution for India as an investment market, because for the first time a large globally disruptive company thought that India has become such a large market for them. So even 5 years ago, Apple didn't think that India would be a large market, but today Uber is pretty serious about India because India is the second largest market. Our sense is that going forward, a lot of disruptive companies may perhaps lead with the India strategy. So I think that may be some similarity. I don't argue with that. I think that for us, brand centricity and differentiation, which is also part of brand thinking, I mean, there's got to be something different, but we don't necessarily limit ourselves to only technology. And unlike a lot of VCs, we don't necessarily like sitting on boards. We don't have the capacity to sit on so many boards. But we like to engage on the subjects of branding and on other strategic topics if we are drawn into it by a partner, but we don't like sitting on boards unlike other partners.
Just last one thing, Nupur. Most of the innovation in this country gets driven because changes in regulation, right? And no serious innovation happens. So if you see any disruptive technology or anything coming, right, then you have a regulator which challenges that, and then. So as a DFI, which really encourages the funds to follow the rule of law and the regulation in the country, how would you then tackle with venture capital funds, right, who actually don't look at the regulatory environment and then.
I mean, just off the cuff, jokingly, I like to believe that Indians are innovative enough to find their ways around any law or any regulation they might encounter. But I mean, seriously, nobody can encourage non-compliance or contravention of laws and regulations and legal requirements. There are implications. There are serious financial, reputational, business. I mean, there are tons of implications. So there's this, regardless of what you think might be the benefit behind a particular idea or a particular disruption, it is, I don't believe it is a good idea to encourage non-compliance in any way. But if I understand what you were referring to, I think the response to that goes back to my earlier off-the-cuff remark. I mean, there are ways of doing things, right? And I don't want to elaborate on that a little more, but it is impossible to support something that's not legal.